In this time of prayer, may we bring into our circle of concern all those who through our prayerful intentions may be held by the inexplicable web of connection that links us together. May our love and prayers not be limited to ourselves or those near us, but extend to all our neighbors, both those we know and those we never will. We lift up in our hearts and prayers members of this community, our loved ones and families. May our hearts be gladdened by the joys of this sacred community, and may we have the strength and compassion to hold the sorrows as well. We lift up in our hearts and prayers all those who are going without today, without food or shelter, without security or love. We especially lift up those who have lost everything to flood waters, both in Texas and around the world. May those who are without not be without hope. We lift up in our hearts and prayers all those who are affected by war and violence, all those who are victims of the worst sides of humanity, those who are afraid, those who suffer from prejudices and hatred. We pray that justice and healing make their way into these lives. This morning we send our collective energy out from this place to create peace. So at this time, I welcome you to name aloud anyone in your life or in your consciousness who could use a little of this prayerful energy. Spirit of life, we offer up these names to your care.
Margarita Campanese.
Gretchen.
Jane, Charles, Red, Christine, Mark, Olivia, Jane, Christina, Michelle, Celine, Joe.
May they feel our prayers and be at peace. May our prayers not be limited to words, but express themselves in action. And may we continue to feel the tug of the web as we realize and hold tight our connections to one another. Amen. Our reading this morning is a Jewish folk tale called The Pillow Full of Feathers. It might be familiar to you. And this morning I'm reading an adaptation of this story by Shoshana Brombacher. In a small town in Eastern Europe lived a wonderful, kind-hearted man with just one weakness. He talked too much about other people. He could not help himself. Whenever he heard a story about somebody he knew, and sometimes about somebody he did not know, he just had to tell it to his friends. Since he was in business, he heard quite a lot of rumors and stories. He loved the attention he got when he shared the stories and was delighted when they laughed because of the way he told them. Sometimes he embellished just a little for effect. Every once in a while, he would feel a tinge of discomfort after telling a story. Not regret exactly, but just a little unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach. He usually shook it off quickly. In any case, the stories he shared had really happened, hadn't they? Most of his stories were just innocent and entertaining, weren't they? One day, he found out something juicy about another businessman in town. Of course, he felt compelled to share what he knew with his colleagues, who told it to their friends, who told it to people they knew, who told it to their wives, who spoke with their friends and their neighbors. Soon it spread around town like wildfire, until finally the news made it back to the man the story was about. Distraught, this man ran to the rabbi of the town and cried that he was ruined. No one was going to do business with him after this. His good name and his reputation were gone. Now this rabbi had a feeling he might know who to ask about this, so he summoned the man who loved to tell stories. When the nice man with the weakness for gossip heard from the rabbi how devastated his colleague was, he felt truly sorry. He honestly had not considered it such a big deal to tell this story, because after all, it was true. The rabbi could check it out if he wanted. Hearing this, the rabbi sighed. True, not true, that really makes no difference, he told the man. You just cannot tell stories about people. This is all lashon hara, slander. Now the man who started the rumor began to feel truly sorry. What can I do to make it undone? He sobbed. I will do anything you say. The rabbi looked at him. Do you have any feather pillows in your house? Yes, said the man, but he was truly confused. Do you think my colleague could use a new pillow? He asked. No, said the rabbi, just bring me one. The man was mystified, but he returned a bit later to the rabbi's study with a nice fluffy pillow under his arm. The rabbi led the man out of his study and up many stairs, and then opened a door to the roof of the building. The man grew a little nervous. When the rabbi took out a knife, he became downright scared. But then the rabbi handed him the knife and gestured to the pillow. Cut it open, he ordered. But Rabbi, it will make a mess. Do as I say, said the rabbi. So the man cut the pillow. A cloud of feathers came out. They landed on the roof and fluttered in the air. Just then, a big gust of wind came and lifted the remaining feathers into the sky. The men watched the fluffy white wisps float over the nearby buildings and down into the streets. It was kind of beautiful, actually. When they had watched the feathers for several minutes, the rabbi turned to the man. Now bring me back all of the feathers, he said, and stuff them back into your pillow. The man stared at the rabbi in disbelief. This is impossible, Rabbi. The ones here on the roof I might be able to get, yes, but the ones that flew out into the city are gone. Rabbi, I can't possibly get them all back. Yes, said the rabbi, and nodded gravely. That is how it is. Once your words leave your mouth, you do not know where they will end up. They fly on the wings of the wind, and you can never get them back. He ordered the man to apologize to the person about whom he had told the story. It was difficult, but it was the least he could do. He ordered him to apologize to the people to whom he had told the story, making them a part of his mistake, too. It was embarrassing, but with each apology, another person learned the lesson of lashon hara and a pillow full of feathers. I'll never in my entire life forget the time that I stole a pair of Barbie doll shoes from a friend of mine whose mother was babysitting me while my parents were at work. They were pink high heels that slipped so perfectly over Barbie's arched foot. They were tiny and wonderful. They made a glorious little sound as they clinked together in my hand. My friend had many such pairs, and I had none. No one would even notice if I brought this one pair home for my own doll. My mother discovered the illicit shoes on our drive home as I secretly held them in my 6-year-old fist. Perhaps it was the wonderful clinking sound that gave me away. I don't know. But I do remember that my mother was not pleased. I imagine that my mom was tired after a long day at work, and there was still dinner to make, 2 kids to feed and wash and get to bed. But there was the dilemma of the shoes and what to do. The mortification I felt as my mother turned the car around and took me back to that house is something that has stayed with me, informing all future decisions. Mom stood silently behind me as I walked up to their door and knocked, turning around just once to make sure that she was serious, that I really had to do this. Her face made clear that she was, and I did. I remember the heat in my face and the tightness in my throat as I apologized and handed over the magnificent pink shoes. They were good about it, my friend and her mom. They were gracious. I'm sure neither of them remember the incident, but I do. Although I didn't have the terms for it then, that day with the Barbie doll shoes was one of my first lessons about right relationship. At the time, it felt like the end of the world to me, but in retrospect, I see that it was simply a practice session to help prepare me for the rest of life's choices and mistakes and relationships. It was important for me to learn the lessons of honesty, confession, and forgiveness then, when the stakes were low, so that I had some knowledge of how deception felt, how shame felt, how forgiveness felt, for later, when the stakes would be higher. And that's why I've decided to talk about right relationship this morning, now, while we're not in conflict, while things are going well, while we like each other, when we're just talking about Barbie shoes, or who cleans up from coffee hour, or what on earth happened to the lampshade next to the pulpit. Which reminds me, I should tell you what happened to the lampshade next to the pulpit. Nothing happened to it, really. Although much speculation has been going on, it has had a large crack in it for many years. It has been repaired by loving hands, but lately it has been harder and harder to clean safely. So a lovely member of our congregation brought it to an expert glass shop to be repaired. It will take a while. We had no lampshade for a few weeks, and then another lovely member donated this one, which matches our chandelier so nicely. We will use it until the original is returned. All is well. The speculation speculations about the lamp were interesting. But the real story is one of multiple people being caring stewards of our building and its beautiful antiques. But if someone had accidentally broken the lamp, I hope our response would be just as loving. Because though we are stewards of our antiques, we are also stewards of our relationships. And those are more important than lamps or Barbie doll shoes. And they need to be tended to with as much care as our building. So we're talking about right relationship this morning. Now, you should know that we do have a disruptive persons policy here at the meeting house, and we have a safety committee. Not everyone on that committee is here this morning, but a few are. Can you stand if you are on our safety committee? Okay, so Jane and Bill are here this morning. Thank you so much. We have practices in place if someone is creating an unsafe environment, causing a scene or disturbance, making a threat. It's important that you know that. But that level of protocol is not what I'm talking about this morning. I'm talking about how we are with one another, not in crisis, but in everyday conversation, with simple misunderstandings and differences of opinion, because those moments occur far more often, and how we handle those small, everyday moments is actually what sets the culture of a community. How do we want to be together? How honest do we want to be with one another? How do we want to resolve conflict? How do we care for each other's feelings? How do we appreciate one another's efforts and work? How do we let each other know if we have a need that is not being met, or if our feelings have been hurt? How do we decide what information to share? These are all questions of right relationship. So we should think about these things now while we are not in conflict, because now is when we can be thoughtful and intentional about building these practices into our culture. Not when we're in crisis mode and acting from our fight or flight instincts, but now when we can practice with small encounters and interactions to live out our values so that we're better at it when the stakes become higher. Right relationship is a term first used by 18th century Quaker leader John Woolman. It means that in one's interactions with another, there is fairness, justice, equity, and compassion. It means that when mistakes are made or feelings are hurt, people are open to the possibility to forgive and be forgiven. It means that conflict is addressed directly, and there is mutual respect even when there is difference of opinion. When thinking about right relationship, it helps us to think for just a minute about this question: what dynamics do our best relationships have? Think for a minute about what your best relationships are like. I'm guessing that they are probably caring, playful, collaborative, authentic, and involve a deep level of trust. They are mutual and sustaining. They are respectful. These are the things that we want to practice in all our relationships, right? These are some good goals. But it's not always easy. In the book, Practicing Right Relationships, Skills for Deepening Purpose, Finding Fulfillment, and Increasing Effectiveness in Your Congregation, Mary Sellen and Daniel Smith write, "Life-giving relationships happen neither automatically nor magically. They are created by people who make the choice to be open, authentic, caring, and curious with each other. They require intentional, deliberate work that will be uncomfortable at times. Right relationship is not always easy. It's not always fun even. It can be, of course, but those aren't the measures. The measures are respect and trust and intention." Reverend David Miller serves the UU congregation in Encinitas, California. He offered his reflections on right relationship in a Facebook post last year. Now, imagine you are in a board meeting or a town meeting or a hockey club meeting, he says, and you are seriously irritated by the conversations around you. Miller says to take a deep breath and ask yourself the following questions. Now, this is a long list, but hang in there with me. I want you to listen to each one. These are life-changing questions. Am I assuming the good intentions of the other? Am I communicating directly with the person with whom I am having an issue? Am I resolving issues, or am I spreading them through gossip, anger, or frustration? Am I reflecting on what personal wounds, issues, and tendencies of mine are contributing to the issue? Am I willing to be an active participant and to work in good faith to clear things up? Am I projecting onto someone else what they are thinking or doing versus engaging them and asking them to share their thoughts and story? Am I actually trying to live the principles and values of Unitarian Universalism by acting with compassion, respect, and a high value of our interdependence? Am I actively listening to what others are saying and not formulating a response or the next comment while they are talking? Can I let go of my need to control the situation? Can I graciously leave space for others by letting someone else speak first, or by not speaking my mind if the point has already been made? Can I help lift up the life of another or of the group in my words and actions? Can I have disagreements with an individual or group, do so in love and respect, and continue to stay in community? Can I take into account the importance of the task in relation to the importance of the relationship? Can I reflect on how my attitude and actions contribute to the tone of our community? Am I willing to not be right? Am I being the change I wish to see in the world? Am I willing to be changed? And finally, can I remember to ask the question, what is the most loving thing I can do or say right now? Those are some pretty incredible questions, aren't they? And if we truly take the time to ask them of ourselves, especially when we are feeling annoyed, we might make some real changes in how we behave with one another. Now, if you think that you have received all the tools you need here this morning to change some of your relationships for the better, and that all you have to do is share these basic tenets with the people you are having difficulty with so that they can become better at this, I have some bad news for you. Sellen and Smith write, right relationship does not begin with the relationship or even the other person with whom we want to have that relationship. It begins with us. Are we awake to where we are and what is going on around us? Are we aware of our attitudes and feelings and the deeper values, hopes, and fears that give rise to them? The foundational skill for developing and maintaining right relationship, they say, is self-awareness, being present in the moment to what we are feeling and what's important to us. Know thyself. Take inventory of your own stuff. Be the change you wish to see. So this community is our practice ground. That's one of the roles of a faith community. We get to try out being our best selves here. So this can now include asking some of those questions of ourselves when we are momentarily annoyed by each other. I know that never happens, right? But here's another reason why we need to practice right relationship here in this community. It's not that the stakes are so low. I mean, it really does matter how we are with one another. Even if we're just negotiating coffee hour, it says something about our congregation and our faith, how we treat each other. But it's important to practice here because we're mostly on the same page. We hold similar values. And we're all trying to better ourselves. I mean, why else would we be here? This is what we have in common. But when we leave those doors, it only gets more complicated. There are people who hold values different than ours. There are people who aren't in the room to work on their stuff. There are people we genuinely don't like. Out in the wider world, right relationship becomes a lot more complex. Speaking of which, you know this isn't the first time I've been scheduled to preach on right relationship. You might not remember this, but I was actually scheduled to give this sermon almost a year ago on November 13th. I was all set to share this good wisdom with you. And then November 8th happened. Well, I tell you what, all of a sudden, right relationship seemed a lot more complicated. And I'll admit, I was kind of thrown off for a while, and I think a lot of us were. Public discourse after that took a bit of a turn for the worse for a while, didn't it? As in, right down the drain. None of us, no matter how we voted, seemed to be assuming good intentions of people who felt differently than we did. Very few of us were asking, am I willing not to be right? Or even, am I actually trying to live the principles and values of Unitarian Universalism by acting with compassion, respect, and a high value of our interdependence? But it's 9-10 months later now, and we've had a little breathing space, and things aren't necessarily easier or less complicated, but it's time. It's time to get back to thinking about right relationship. And there are endless opportunities for practice. Take this recent hurricane, Hurricane Harvey. It's an insane situation. I mean, 50 inches of rain in a weekend. So many people are suffering right now. And we have to look at some of our reactions and ask those right relationship questions. Because it's really quite tempting to just fixate on Melania's shoes, right? It always comes back to the high heel shoes. That's easier than focusing on the devastation. And it's easier to be angry, right? At Texas Republicans who voted against Hurricane Sandy relief, at Joel Osteen and his megachurch for not opening quickly enough to flood victims, or at local government for not forcing evacuation. But we don't have all the details, and we don't know the history that led to those decisions being made. But we all want to Monday morning quarterback instead of asking, how can I help? And you know, when we make those decisions to criticize rather than ask, how can I help? It has real consequences. And it's a fast track right out of right relationship. I've been following a few people in the Houston area, including Brene Brown, who I love and who I quote here a lot. And she says this: "Thank you for the well wishes and prayers. Maybe it's weird, but it really, really mattered. Thank you for lifting my spirits. Thank you for not judging. We were advised to stay here. We weren't reckless. Judgment and scolding about not evacuating are the opposite of empathy and helpful. It's painful. It's also how people make themselves feel better when terrible stuff happens. I would have done something different. That will never be me. I pray to God you're right," she says. "I hope you will never watch your elderly neighbor stand waist high in water and sob as their house gets destroyed. I hope this never happens to you. But if it does, I hope people don't lead with judgment." And a huge thank you, she says, for not diminishing the request for prayer and thoughts. "I'm a very involved citizen," she says, "and I don't believe prayer and civil action are mutually exclusive. You don't have to denigrate one to support the other. My mother lost her house in Allison, and her neighbor died in the process. I can tell you how every politician in this city and state thinks and votes on the environment and overdevelopment. And I pray on my knees." "Thank you," she says, "to everyone who lifted someone up in your own way and gave $5 or $50 to whatever organization you support that will help the people here who need it. My big request is don't forget about the people here. 6 months after the storm, that's when the depression and grief can set in. The adrenaline is depleted and the world has moved on." And she closes by saying, "Thank you to this big, messy-hearted community. We need each other in ways we don't even understand." So thank you, Brene Brown. You are always so wise. So, right relationship, take 2. I'm not saying I've got it all figured out, especially when I think about politics on the national scale. But at least I'm in a place where I'm willing to begin trying again, to begin practicing again. And the best place to start is with the ones I love, the ones we love, and with ourselves. Because when there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. When there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the home. Where there is harmony in the home, there will be honor in the nation. Where there is honor in the nation, there will be peace in the world. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be.